Hi folks, so I'm standing on the Pennine Bridleway, something that I completed in October of this year, and I have to say, I think this national trail is one of the most underrated trails just generally, and I'm going to give you hopefully the inside track, so maybe you will rise to the Pennine challenge. Now just some of the basic facts to begin with. So it's officially recorded as being 205 miles, but that includes two loops. One being the Mary Towny Loop, which is 47 miles, and then the Settle Loop, which is 10 miles. Now if you just do the complete linear route, which I think most people do, then it's 155 miles. So yeah, that's a bit more within most people's grasp. And it's about 20,000 feet of ascent. Now the actual trail was originally put together with horse riders and cyclists in mind, rather than hikers. Now the thing is, Mary Towny was a horse rider, and originally the Mary Towny Loop was the first thing that was done related to the trail. And that was done in 2002. Then in 2005, the Settle Loop was put together. And at the same time, the southern half of the Pennine Bridleway was put in place and opened. And then it wasn't until 2012 before the trail was completed and opened up all the way to just outside of Kirby Stephen. Now, the trail ends at an A road, would you believe, about 2 miles outside of Kirby Stephen. And the reason for that was that it was originally envisaged that the trail would go all the way to Northumberland and would actually then be 350 miles. Now, I'll come back to the finish in a little while. But in terms of where it starts, it actually starts at a place called Middletown Top, which is in Derbyshire. One of the biggest challenges of this trail is actually getting to the start. Now the nearest train station is a place called Cromford, and that's probably, I'd say, 2 miles away at most, and you can get on a particular trail to walk directly to there. There's also a bus, I think it's the 110 or the 111, and also you can get a train to Matlock, which is more of a major station, and if you wanted supplies before you started, that would be a good place to get off. You're also more likely to probably be able to find a taxi from Matlock to get to the start, and it's about 5 miles away. Also, the buses that I mentioned, the 111 and the 110, they also go to the start at Middletown Top. When you get to Middletown Top, it is the start of the trail, which used to be a disused railway line. Sorry, I mean it actually is a disused railway line and still is. Yeah, so the start is a nice 10-15 miles of perfect flatness, so a good easy start. One other thing before I forget is that where they joined the southern part to the northern part, there was still a bit that didn't get completed, and it's around a place called Hatfield. Probably about a 5 mile section where the signage is a little bit lacking, but it's an easier part to complete if you're actually hiking. There's still a few signs in place for hikers. Apparently there's no official bridleway for horses for that particular section. So again, I would actually say as a hiker you're at an advantage. One of the good things about this trail is there are quite a number of railway stations along the way, which means that you could do it in stages, and when you get to the end as I said, for horses and cyclists, the route kind of carries on over to the west side to go on to the A683 and finishes about 2 miles outside of Kirby Stephen. Whereas in actual fact, you'd be better picking up the Pennine journey, Wainwright's Pennine journey, carry on north and get to Kirby Stephen, because at Kirby Stephen there's a station. So very easy to finish as well. In fact, obviously the finish is easier than the actual start in terms of transport. In terms of navigation, then the Pennine Bridleway is probably one of the easiest trails that I've done. And the reason for that is fairly obvious when you think about it. It's actually directed at horses and cyclists, and therefore the tracks are pretty well defined. Now, also the other thing that's worth mentioning is, for some reason, the signage that's actually there is way better than the signage that's actually for the Pennine Way. And in fact, the signage that's good on the Pennine Way is often shared with the Pennine Bridleway. So signage is good. However, for hikers, the one thing that is lacking is a good guidebook. I think the reason, when I tried to do a bit of research on it, is quite a few of the well-known published guides for walkers got in the habit of waiting for the final opening, and so they're under this illusion that there's that bit that's missing in the middle. But like I say, there is a bit of signage there, so that's not such a problem. So the one guidebook that I can recommend is this one, which is aimed at cyclists, and it was published in 2021, so it's relatively recent. Also, even though it's aimed at cyclists, and I once have thought they would have time to stop in a sense, there is quite a bit of history in it as well that you can pick up in terms of points of interest. So yeah, definitely recommend that book. Never thought I'd be recommending a cyclist book, but there you go. The other thing is that because you're a walker, you can actually go places that obviously horses can't, and also cyclists can't, because they have to stick to the official bridleway. And therefore, having a good map is really useful. I use the Harvey's map, and the one thing there is just be careful that you pick up the most recently published one. I did look at a second-hand site, and I noticed that there the Harvey's map was actually just for the southern section, but a later version, I think it's 2017, that version shows the complete route. Now, like I say, you can avoid some of the road by having a map and studying it in detail and considering some of the alternatives, which I did kind of using this map. And I'll show you one example here. So this is a good example of where the bridleway, as you can see from this sign here, goes down the hill. I'll show you on the map, but very bizarrely there's a bridleway here, and if we go this way we avoid going on the road, and it's slightly shorter. Just on the point of roads, I've worked out it's probably somewhere in the region of about 20% is on road. Now you have to be careful if you're using a like a hiker app. The reason being is that even though there was certainly one part where there was a well-defined track, but the app actually went on the road, and you can imagine if a cyclist has used the GPS route of they've set it in the first place, they're more likely to use the road option than the track option. So just watch out for that. As you would have seen from the map, there's quite a few stations, and of course that gives you a clue as to we're relatively, or can be, close to urban, and therefore there's a number of towns and villages that are really helpful from the resupply point of view. There are probably 3 that are fairly major and have all the facilities you might need. So the first one you're likely to come across is Hebden Bridge, just a slight diversion off route, and there you'll find a co-op, a calf, a number of pubs. I say calf, I mean calves, lots of calves, pub, and yeah, I think a couple of outdoor shops as well, so any emergencies kit wise you should be okay. And I think there's a hostel there as well, so Hebden Bridge is actually a good stop for refuel and everything else you might need. Then the next one is a place called, I can't remember if Long Preston comes first or Cecil. I think it's Long Preston. This is Long Preston. The great thing about it is that if you need anything resupply, then not only have you got hiking gear over there, there's a post office that you can get food and things, and then here you've got the pub as well. So everything you might need is in Long Preston. And then finally you've got Cecil, and at Cecil, as well as Hebden Bridge, you've also got a railway station and outdoor shops. Castleberg Outdoor, one of my favourites, is actually there. And yeah, lots of pubs and cafes again. So you're not going to have problems resupply. And then in terms of water, as well as the towns and villages that you'll come across, a number of times you're up on the moors, and like we did on day 7, getting water from some of the streams, obviously filter and boil, and you'll be totally fine. Right, let's think about accommodation. In terms of accommodation, I would say that's relatively straightforward. In the guidebook that I shared with you, listed at the back, there's 10 hostels, 12 campsites, and 23 B&Bs, pubs and hotels that you can potentially use. Also, here's a couple of things that I used as well. So this is where we are tonight, just over May's farm shop. So you come out of Foxhill and you turn left on the road, and it's about a kilometre down the road. The other thing to consider is the train stations in terms of where they can get you to. So for example, from Hebden Bridge, it's 3/4 of an hour to Manchester on the train, or 3/4 of an hour to Leeds on the train. So you can either have a wild night out or do as I do and actually popped home for the night, which was really nice, I have to say. The other thing is that if you've done the Pennine Way, then you'll know how relatively easy wild camping is. So that's something else that you can throw into the mix, because there is quite a few times when you're kind of up on the moors, and I've got a great example of what we did and where we were on the 7th night as well. I did mention the challenges of getting to the start of the Pennine Bridleway, and I appreciate that might take some time. So I've done a bit of research for that first day. It's worth keeping in mind because there's a pub just off the trail up here. You can actually stop at a campsite that's attached to a pub, I think it's called the Royal Oak, at about 10 miles into the route, at a place I think it's called Shadlow. And then further along the route, there's actually a campsite at 18.5 miles, which I think is called Beechcroft Farm, and for hikers it's £11 a night. 18.5 might sound a long way, but in actual fact the trail's virtually flat because of the disused railway. so you won't struggle to get to that particular campsite. Now, where does the Pennine Bridleway sit in comparison? The thing is, the problem the Pennine Bridleway's got is the big brother of the Pennine Way. And it's difficult to compare the two. I mean, from a hiking perspective, obviously the Pennine Way is a bigger challenge, and you, in a sense, if you complete it, you get more satisfaction from that. But if it didn't have the big brother, then I think it would be more famous. It's a lot better than a lot of the other national trails that I've done. And so I think it should be considered in a kind of standalone way. Don't underestimate it. It's so undeservedly of the reputation that it does currently have of maybe being too much of a bridleway. It's better suited for hikers, I believe. So if you're up for the challenge, give it a shot. I'm sure you will enjoy it. If you found this information helpful, then please do subscribe, like and hype, and hopefully one day I'll see you on the trails. Bye folks!